One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. This is the best day of the week, not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show, and this is episode number 208 if you are scoring at home. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm your host and executive vice president of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 42 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank, pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth to counter the climate alarmist narrative.
How dare you?
There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, Greta. So I hope, maybe if not you, but everybody else watching this show, bring friends to view us every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath this video. Those all convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets the show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this show, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to join other friends of this show and support it, you can visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can help others bring the show to the world every single week. And before we get started, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We got a big show today, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was also the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center for Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. Linnea Lueken, Senior Fellow for Energy Environment Policy at Heartland. And thanks again to our producers, Andy Singer and Silas Pearson, making sure everything runs and looks great. And joining us today, very special guest, John Robson. He's the executive director of Climate Discussion Nexus, which is an organization based in Ontario, Canada, and formed in 2018 by a group of citizens concerned about expensive, ill-planned energy policies intended to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Hey, that describes us too. Welcome to the show today, John.
Great to be here.
I should start the show by thanking you very much for sending all the smoke down here to the United States from those fires. Greatly appreciated, especially here in the upper Midwest, which they're not used to that. I lived in Southern California for a while, so it's actually no shock to me, but people are kind of losing their minds about it now.
Exactly. I mean, we're happy to share with our American friends, Canada's natural beauty and the stuff that's on fire.
Yes, appreciate that very much. Actually, before we get to the show, bring everybody up. I mean, we've seen that, as usual, everything that happens in the world that's not normal, which I guess is 75 degrees and sunny with just enough rain, but not too much rain, and all that stuff is blamed on climate change. Climate change is the reason that the fires in Ontario are blazing hard and hot. I imagine you don't think that's the case. I'm thinking maybe it's poor forest management. Nope. Did John freeze on us? All right.
I think it's just
fair. Yeah, no, in the opening clip when
we're having some audio.
Linnea commented, people think it wasn't weather until 1910. We always had wildfires. We're actually having a quiet wildfire season, and yet people are saying the fact that anything's on fire is proof of some imminent calamity. Canada has 300 billion trees, every one of them made of wood. In that situation, you're gonna have fires. It's like that's what you put in your fireplace, right? Well, nature feels much the same way.
I think this is Canada's way of getting around Trump's tariff on timber. If we can't get the whole wood, we'll just get the smoke.
Well, hopefully the fires won't continue to burn his internet connection,
Yeah,
so we
tax
can keep John in here very nicely. All right. Well, let's get started as we always do with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Silas. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. This is a fun one. I have titled it Giant Mirrors in Space. And this comes from our friends and on the show here today, Anthony Watts at What's Up With That. Headline, Giant Bond Villain Space Mirror Approved by Feds. You wrote this, Anthony, so get yourself ready to comment here as I go through it. Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to fry. If you've ever watched Diamonds Are Forever, Die Another Day, or any of the other James Bond films featuring megalomaniacs with space-based super weapons, you probably assumed giant orbiting mirrors capable of directing sunlight at the Earth would remain safely in the realm of Hollywood fantasy. Apparently, no one told the Federal Communications Commission, in a decision that would make Ernst Blofeld nod approvingly while stroking his cat, regulators have approved the first step toward a commercial constellation of orbital mirrors designed to beam sunlight onto the Earth's surface. What could possibly go wrong? Anthony cites the website spaceweather.com, which reports, last week, the FCC authorized Reflect Orbital Incorporated to launch a huge space mirror named Arendelle 1. From an orbit about 625 kilometers high, it will cast a moving 5-kilometer wide patch of light onto the Earth about as bright as a full moon. Later, the company could combine beams from multiple satellites to create much brighter spotlights. Reflect Orbital wants to launch 50,000 more by 2035, selling sunlight on demand to solar farms, construction sites, and search and rescue teams. If Reflect Orbital's plan is realized, it could be calamitous, not only for astronomy, but also the natural world as a whole. Nocturnal animals and night-blooming plants, tuned by evolution to the rhythm of day and night, would suddenly find their darkness interrupted by moving pools of redirected sunlight. Small favors? Reflect Orbital says the light will not be bright enough to start fires. Good news. The FCC itself acknowledged some of these concerns, but noted in its order that optical astronomy and the environment lie largely outside of its jurisdiction. They can only regulate the project's use of radio signals. For now, no U.S. agency regulates how bright a satellite may shine. The company's FCC application attracted more than 1,800 public comments, most of them sharply critical. Nevertheless, the launch of Arendelle 1 is now expected before the end of the year. Anthony, if the federal government is going to start passing out permits for Bond villain plans, I'd like to put in my application for a volcano base and a rocket that looks like Bob's Big Boy statue. That's
right.
Exactly. I had a lot of fun writing this article because it was just so absurd. You know, the thing is that we have all the climate alarmists saying that we have to do more solar power in order to reduce our carbon footprint. And so this thing is built in a way to be able to shine light on solar power at night. But the only idea for solar power is to reduce the temperature of the Earth. So what are they doing? They're planting 50,000 mirrors to shine the sun's light on the Earth at night. What will that do? Well, gosh, it will increase the temperature of the planet at night. And that will increase the global average. Bingo, global warming happens again. I mean, the absurdity is just off the scale. The other thing is they say this is not bright enough to, start fires or blind anyone or whatever yet. 50,000 of these? Yeah, you could do some serious damage if you coordinate those things. And it just it's just a bad idea all around. And the left keeps coming up with these ideas where they want to put something in space to save the planet. You know, they want to spray aerosols from space, or have reflecting mirrors to reflect the sun away, or a directional mirror, or whatever it might be. And it's all insane. None of this stuff is ever going to work. And I suspect that this thing will never get off the ground. I looked at the capitalization on this company, and they're only around $31 million. You know, you can't launch a satellite for $31 million. That's a chump change in the satellite launch world. They're expecting to get investors, and I suspect sensible investors, the ones that actually pay attention to, you know, economics and reality, probably will not fund this thing because they see it as a bad risk, because even if it does get launched, the public outcry is going to be massive. So yeah, big fail on this one.
Maybe climate alarmists will end up funding it because they want disaster, they want raised temperatures. I can see some major well-funded climate, alarm groups saying, "Oh yeah, let's have these mirrors to shine on solar panels at night, so we take away the argument that solar doesn't work." But then they get large magnifying glasses and set fire with it. The sun doesn't set fires, but you can set a fire with a magnifying glass. It appalls me that the FCC, that any government agency would license this stuff. They say they don't have the power to stop it, but they can just say, no, you can't have the radio license. We're not going to go in on this madness that has nothing, by the way, to do with sort of radio communications. Controlling a satellite is not radio communications in any meaningful sense.
Yeah, it's one of these classic plans that almost certainly won't work and will be disastrous if it does. And I hope my connection isn't proving that satellites don't work, because I'm actually reaching you by satellite from the Canadian forest. But the other thing that's remarkable about these kind of plans is how many environmentalists don't seem to like nature very much. Like, wouldn't it be wonderful if the planet was the way it is, except it was day during the night? It's like, no, I thought you loved the way things were. Leave it be. It's night at night, and we like that.
Yeah, this might give a whole new aspect to permanent daylight savings time. It's just
That's right. I have kind of two thoughts on this. One, you know me, if anyone has watched the show for a long time, you know I'm generally not very alarmist about these experimental geoengineering, like first step, we're going to test this thing out things. I tend to not really worry. This one in particular really screams grift. For one, I can't see a scenario in which using these satellites will be cheaper than battery storage for solar panel optimization. Even though batteries are quite expensive, I don't see how launching satellites will be less expensive for these operations. And second, the actual design of the thing itself. So I was looking into this a little bit because I was like, how bright are we talking here? Because, a lot of the images you see online is like this huge, super bright spotlight. The way they described it is like a kilometer or two wide at Earth's surface area of light that was almost as bright or somewhat comparable to a full moon. That doesn't seem like they're going to get very much out of solar anyway. There already is a little bit of a reflective, like lunar light that solar can sometimes capture. It's not very much. It really doesn't sound like it's all that good. Anyway, what this thing is basically just like a big Mylar space blanket.
Right.
Not even, huh?
Yeah, like a big Mylar space blanket. That's at best.
Yeah, and so I'm sure they intend to, if they were to continue with this, improve on the design, but it seems like it's just a lose-lose for them. But second, in the scenario where we're talking about like worst case things, I find it either really, really foolish and stupid, or like cynical and maybe even evil to call this thing Air Rendell. Because this is here I am about to be a real nerd. The name comes from Tolkien's Silmarillion, which is, and this character is like kind of almost a Greek tragedy type character where they get cast up into the sky or whatever, and they're, beaming light down on the earth forever or whatever. That kind of a thing. Tolkien was anti-industrialist. He really did not like the destruction of the environment of his beloved England and the countryside. He was very troubled by deforestation and anything that, significantly impacted like his ability to see the stars, that kind of thing. The idea of permanently in some areas impacting, or even just temporarily impacting, the like visibility of the night sky from like a giant space spotlight and naming it after one of his characters is just like evil. I don't know what else to say. It's just, it's this weird thing where they're trying to be nerdy and like honor like reference a nerd thing, and what they're actually doing is intensely insulting the legacy of a famous fiction author.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good analogy too. And the other thing they haven't considered is clouds. I mean, you've got cloud cover all over the earth at any given time. And so, maybe you've got a solar farm over Minnesota or something, and you want to illuminate it. Well, gosh, what if it's socked in with clouds for 4 or 5 days? Pretty common occurrence. What good does this do to anybody? Nothing, really. And the other thing is that I think they should get a celebrity sponsorship for this thing, maybe George Foreman, and he could call it the George Foreman air fryer.
I think there is one. Anthony may be right. Maybe this never gets off the ground. They never get the funding. You look at these projects like Beyond Meat and other things that get a lot of startup funding and then fail. But the danger of this thing, the real danger of this thing, if it succeeds, I think, is putting a lot of more space junk up in the atmosphere. How many of these things will fail? And even if they don't fail, they're floating around. Will they interfere with other satellites? Will there be crashes? Will this stuff fall back down to Earth? We've already got so much space junk up there. It seems to me this won't be a good thing. And of course, all the astronomers that run these giant space telescopes that are already complaining of the night sky being polluted by light pollution, this will ramp that up.
Yeah, Sterling, that's actually something that was addressed. I'm sorry, John.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that actually the issue of it falling, when it eventually has to be decommissioned, is addressed in the FCC document. I guess there has been a lot of debate and analysis, or like estimated analysis, I guess, because one of the problems that someone had raised about these particular devices, eventually falling out of orbit, is, are we going to have like random flashes of like beams of light being flashed across the sky for a year while this thing falls out of orbit and is no longer controllable? And I guess they investigated whether or not that's how that would work. And it seems the answer is no. But they do have decommissioning and space trash plans. This kind of thing isn't just like, we are not just throwing stuff into space with no plan whatsoever about how to handle the space trash issue. It's but it was interesting to me because I thought of that too. I thought, man, are we going to have, when this thing does have to fall out of orbit and, before it burns up or however they're disposing of it, are we going to have just like flashing disco lights over the planet at night? But
I just think, they can say they plan for it. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
There was just a story about how we should put these bus-sized satellites up in space full of chemicals that we could release to stop geomagnetic storms. They're completely untested and ludicrous. Geomagnetic storms are a legitimate concern, but we can deal with those by putting Faraday cages locally around critical chip infrastructure. And then we could devote some of our time and attention to cleaning up the existing space junk, because we are more and more dependent on satellites, and yet we just keep putting stuff up there. And it's one of the ways in which this obsession with climate change and the fact that we have to stop there being weather is keeping us from putting time, money, and thought into other real environmental problems or engineering problems. So it's, one of the ways these things fail isn't just the disco lights. It's because they take away from other problems that really actually maybe ought to get some attention.
Yeah.
And in response to Linnea, look, I know they say they figured this out, but just because the government says we've looked at it and it's okay, doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. It's an untried technology, so they can't have tested it. They don't know. Yeah. All they know is they'll be putting stuff up there, and based on the plan they submitted, they hope it works like they said it would work. And of course, every technology I've ever heard of always works like they said it would work.
Yeah.
Well, I suspect we'll have congressional hearings on new kinds of UFOs soon.
Yeah. And then finally, the one thing they haven't considered is how much bad luck these things are going to bring. I mean, we've got 50,000 of these things in orbit or so. How many of them fall out of orbit and break? It's 7 years bad luck when you break a mirror. So just add that up. We're headed for disaster.
For sure. Yeah. Well, maybe I don't understand why the FCC has jurisdiction over this in the first place. But maybe if they do go up there, we can use them to cook some ill-tempered sea bass. That would be nice from space. All right. Let's move on to our next topic today. This is a pretty big story. I imagine we're going to be covering this on multiple shows going forward. Kagan climate conflict. This is a story out of Fox News. Headline: conservative groups say Justice Kagan cannot be impartial in upcoming Supreme Court litigation. I'll read here for you. Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan is facing calls for a Senate Judiciary Committee investigation after a coalition of conservative legal organizations accused her of failing to recuse herself from a major climate change case expected to be argued before the High Court next term, alleging she publicly endorsed legal theories central to the dispute. In a letter sent Monday to Senate Judiciary Committee leaders, the coalition urged lawmakers to investigate whether Kagan violated federal ethics rules by participating in Suncor Energy versus Boulder County. The Heartland Institute, by the way, full disclosure, we are a signatory to this letter, and we also suggest that her endorsement is an ethics violation. So, continuing, the coalition argued that Kagan compromised her impartiality by writing the foreword to the Reference Manual on Scientific Evidence, which included a climate science chapter that was later criticized by Congress and Republican attorneys general as biased and was eventually removed. Again, we and our friends in the movement had a hand on getting that removed as well. Suncor Energy versus Boulder County asks whether Colorado local governments can use state law to hold oil and gas companies financially liable for their alleged contributions to climate change. In her foreword, Kagan wrote that judges would increasingly confront lawsuits involving climate science, unquote, and encourage them to use the manual as a resource for evaluating scientific evidence. The coalition argues those comments, along with her endorsements of the manual, create the appearance that she had already embraced legal theories underlying the plaintiff's claims. That'll do it for that. That's good background. Sterling, I'll start with you. Justice Elena Kagan has a bit of a spotty record when it comes to recusals. Do you think she's going to do the right thing here?
I do not. I think that she's going to stay on this case. She's already issued her defense. I don't know if you heard this, but her response to these concerns that were raised was, "Oh, well, I didn't read it. I didn't read the manual that I wrote the chapter, the introduction, recommending it be used. I didn't read it." It's like Nancy Pelosi saying, "Oh, we've got to pass the bill to know what's in it." Evidently, she's willing to endorse anything put out by not just climate alarmists, but medical alarmists and anything else. If it gets into the reference manual, it must be a good thing. And so I'm willing to write an introduction endorsing it. It's just awful that she would write an introduction on something she doesn't know what's in it. If you believe she doesn't know what's in it, because my suspicion is she read it and thought it was okay. That she believes that states should dictate national energy and climate policy, as opposed to what the Constitution says, which is interstate commerce is the role and responsibility of Congress alone. So I don't think she's going to recuse herself. My hope is that despite the fact that, maybe she'll be chagrined and have to side with a majority that finds against these things and then she can say, see, I wasn't biased. But I don't know.
Yeah. Anthony, the reference manual on scientific evidence, we've covered that on this show in the past. Maybe you can give us a little background on that for our audience that may be hearing about this for the first time.
Well, the idea was a long time ago to provide manuals for these justices to be able to understand significantly detailed topics, whether it was engineering or science, biology, whatever. Try to help them get through the heavy duty parts of it so that they could understand it better. And that's all well and good if it's indeed a reference manual. But the problem with this particular thing is it went beyond being a reference manual and it started becoming an advocacy manual for climate. And so, it wasn't just simple stuff like, how temperature is measured or whatever. It went beyond that into climate change will cause. Climate change will be, creating these problems. Climate change is a threat, all that kind of stuff. And so it switched from just being a technical manual to being advocacy and alarmism, which these folks can't help themselves do. And that's why it's a problem. It's no longer just a reference.
Yeah, the Judicial Center that issued the manual has pulled out the chapter. It's pulled out the single chapter devoted solely to climate change. But in the rest of the document, it still references climate alarmists who are involved in the cases. It was written by people who are actively involved in one side of the case. You can't expect objective scientific assessments from people who are arguing for one side. And for her to endorse that, that's a little scary.
She obviously didn't read it.
Well, that's what she claims.
Yeah.
And didn't her mother tell her the problem isn't making a mistake, it's the inept cover-up? Like, if she just said, well, I think they're interesting doctrines and people ought to give them consideration, this could have been a falsehood, but it would probably have gotten her out of trouble. But I didn't read it. Like, what? Are you a fool? You're a Supreme Court justice. How can you be such a witling? And I mean, in Canada, we have trouble with judges accusing themselves, and we have even less control over them than you do. But that doesn't inspire confidence in her judgment more broadly, does it?
Well, this is a Supreme Court that has someone on it that can't tell you what a woman is, despite herself claiming to be a woman.
Maybe what we can do is create a counter to this. The claim that the alarmists have is the sky is falling. So, Linnea, you raise chickens, so I propose that we have the Linnea Climate Chicken Index created. And you can query your chickens on a daily basis and ask them, is the sky falling? And there you go.
Or just a daily count. How many were hit by chunks of it? Well, they'll watch out for that satellite.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'll poll them every day.
It's about as useful as polling a climate scientist in some cases, that's for sure. And certainly,
so you could ask them.
Manual.
Look, what's scary? Another scary thing about this is they pulled the chapter, right? The organization that it was written for, the Judiciary Center, that it was written for to provide a baseline for scientific evidence in trials, pulled that chapter. But the NAS and the other organizations that composed it and composed the rest of the manual have stood by it. And we continue to fund these organizations. The government continues to fund these organizations, and it's still out there, as is all the material that's not in that chapter that still cites climate alarmists. It's scary. It's bad. If they can't pull the manual off their website and off the NAS's website, if they can't do that, then they need to cease getting any funding from the government.
Right. Yeah, and that's a topic for another day. I think we're probably going to hit that next week, get into it a little bit deeper. But We have another show on Thursdays at the same time called In the Tank, hosted by Linnea. We talk a lot about how leftist activists have infiltrated so many of the institutions in the United States and sadly in Canada as well. And they take an esteemed, respected institution and just kind of wear it as a skin suit while mouthing their leftist activism. And the same thing has happened with this manual and so many things. Climate alarmists are using the institutions that were once trusted and deserve to be trusted and using it to advance propaganda. There is no reason why I would expect Elena Kagan to be as expert on climate science as, frankly, everybody on this program and most of the people watching it. So you need to have an objective, truth-based, scientific document to help you understand complex issues. And the left has taken that over and made advocacy out of it to basically make sure all the lawsuits go their way. And their lawsuits are actually not based on science anyway. So kudos to the groups, including ourselves, that have helped, draw attention to this matter and to get it fixed. All right, speech over. Let's move on to our next item here. We call this the climate score scam. This is a story out of the Daily Caller. Headline: this little-known climate report card casts a dark cloud over home sales, and major investment firms are involved. I'll read from it for you. A new climate-related metric advanced by a company linked to private equity firms is quietly subverting the U.S. housing market, a new report claims. Major online real estate platforms such as Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, and Redfin have all featured predictive climate risk scores, according to a July report from the American Energy Institute and Consumers Research, first obtained by the Daily Caller News Foundation. The scores, developed by private company First Street, can often directly contrast with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, official flood maps and determinations. Quote, for most American families, a home is their single largest financial asset and the primary vehicle for building generational wealth, the report claims. These scores lack statutory authority, formal appeals, and frequently contradict FEMA maps, it adds. A documented $6.2 million case study shows buyer interest collapsing and prices dropping after a private score assigned a 9 out of 10 flood risk to a FEMA Zone X, which is a minimal risk property, unquote. We will put all the stories here into the show notes, links to them so you can read them for yourself. Linnea, I want to start with you. You've been following this quite a bit, and as our friend Jason Isaac, hopefully we'll have him on here soon to talk about his high carbon lifestyle cookbook because we're going to speak that into existence. But anyway, our friend Jason said on X that, quote, its climate risk scores come with no regulatory authority, no appeals process, and no accountability to homeowners, unquote. I think that just scratches the surface on the problems here.
Yeah, well, one of the big problems is that you can't do anything about it once you're given these scores. So Zillow in particular, I think no longer uses them. Last year, there was an article that came out, I think it was the New York Times, that reported, it might have been the Los Angeles Times too, because this First Street organization has been doing this stuff all over the country, giving scores to different properties and even business scores. But they reported that there were homes in either Los Angeles or San Francisco, somewhere like that, that were being marked as in severe danger of flooding when they were in areas that were classified as like a Zone X flood score, meaning it has a 1% chance to have a major flood problem any given year. That's not something, and FEMA zones can be out of date. FEMA zones, flood zones have to be updated a lot because every time it floods or every time the land use changes, you put a new neighborhood in and you compact the soil or whatever, your flood zones change. So that stuff can be out of date. And so First Street tries to claim that because they're using this like advanced climate modeling, they can determine it better than FEMA can. Well, the problem is their models, one, do not have the resolution to do property by property flood analysis. They'll have a house that is directly next to another house having a completely different flood score, not because it's on a significantly different elevation, but just because it just happened to turn out that way in their algorithms or in their models. They've had houses that were up on top of hills that they gave a severe flood score to, like a 9 out of 10 flood potential score to. And the homeowner trying to sell their house contacts Zillow or Redfin or whatever saying, can you please remove this score? It's obviously nonsense. Here's documentation from local hydrologists saying that this is, that they evaluated my property this year and said that this is nonsense. And First Street says, no, we're going to go with our models. We're not going to go with what the local professionals in this stuff say. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense.
Well,
we're just going to defer to our models.
That's
And
the problem.
it's complete and utter
About
nonsense.
models. Models are more important than actual data, and maybe that house has never had flooding in its entire history. Well, that doesn't matter. Our models are more important. That is just, as I like to say, bullshit of the highest order.
Yeah. And Darren and Loki points out the homeowners should be able to sue based on reduced home sale prices. And in fact, there are lawsuits against First Street and I think also Zillow and some other organizations over this very thing. Last year they were filed, I believe. Maybe it was a few years ago filed, but last year it made the news, talking about them being sued over reducing the home values of people's properties and ignoring the petitions of local experts on these issues.
Yeah, the main problem is it's based on climate models, and climate models are flawed. Climate models are known to be flawed. It's not a mystery. We know they don't work well at large resolution, much less small resolution. It's known. So to pretend otherwise is awful. I thought, Linnea and I have written about this for a few years now in different places at climaterealism.com, different articles. And I thought Zillow had agreed not to use their stuff anymore. In a past article, we wrote about that.
They did. We've got that ready.
Maybe they have backed off, but it's costing people money. Of course, it's also gaining some people money, the people who aren't in flood zones. Now that there's less real estate out there, their property values go up. But also, and this is an important factor, remember who is behind a lot of this stuff. Large investment managers, ESG advocates like BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard. They can buy up distressed, flood-prone properties at cheap prices, right? And then use them as rentals. Yep. We say, we don't want industry buying up housing and using it as rentals. Well, you use this zoning, this risk score zoning from
of course the good news here. Speaking of things that do work, the free market does work. And so if some people are systematically underpricing homes, it creates opportunities for people who are less foolish. So unless the government gets involved, this one will tend to correct itself. And as we see, Zillow having to decide to stop doing this, they were going to lose business if they kept mispricing homes because people in real estate need to get them accurate. So the trick here is don't have the government start making you take these into account.
Well, the problem, but here you have powerful economic interest who support this. People who own, in some instances, 70% of the stock market of certain things. So Zillow says it removed them, but I at least know of one case in Tennessee where the lady's home's been on the market for 2 years and she's had to knock hundreds of thousands of dollars off of it because Zillow refuses to remove the First Street rating on her home. And legal action is probably coming forward.
Yeah, this is, and it's a self perpetuating it's a self-fulfilling prophecy too. The whole point of the Fresno, I was just thinking about an example from Fresno. The whole point of the First Street analysis or their premise is to say that home values are going to decline because of climate change. And then they're assigning lower home value, like assigning these scores that cause you to have a lower home value. And they're blaming it on climate change. They're generating their own profit model by doing this. And they make money off from BlackRock and stuff by doing this. So there was an example, we have this over at Climate Realism. The article is called Contrary to climate groups' claims, the Fresno Bee points out population and property values are increasing. And this is an example where First Street went and they wrote an analysis of the Fresno County area. And they said that over 45% of the population is going to abandon the area by 2055 due to climate change, causing low property values. And yet, over time, over the same period of time, where because of urban heat island and other factors, and the population is massively increasing in Fresno, air quality has improved in Fresno, despite what First Street was saying. And home values continue to rise in Fresno, despite what First Street is saying. So they are attempting to push people to behave in a way that would make their predictions come true. It's complete and utter nonsense. I wonder almost if they're even fully aware that that's what they're doing. I imagine that they are, but maybe they're just that buried in their stupid spreadsheets that they don't realize.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
It has been paying off for them. But another problem of this too is that, insurance companies are using First Street analyses. And insurance is already super expensive in places like Florida or places like Texas or California, where you have natural disasters that are pretty severe, just naturally. Your insurance cost on your home might be influenced by a random First Street report that claims that your home is in a severe flood zone, even though the actual FEMA score says that it's not. So this is a serious problem that these guys can manipulate the market like this.
We can only hope that they get sued out of complete existence.
Yeah. John, there's two basic rules of life. Don't mess with somebody's kids, and also don't mess with somebody's home. That is, you're courting some serious consequences for doing those sorts of things.
Yep.
Well, yeah, because your home, it's far and away the biggest investment you're ever going to make unless you are in a particularly elite class of investor. But again, I'm not sure I would trust FEMA either. My faith in government's ability to get information right without fear or favor is very low. But really, the ability of private sector actors to do better risk assessment in the long run, again, if you keep the government out, because you look at the cost of insurance in California, I suspect the state has something to do with that. But and lawsuits, yes, again, those are a legitimate tool. But real estate agents need accurate information, and that I hope in this case will be the bright light.
Agreed. All right, we got one more item here on our crazy climate news of the week rundown, and this is Green New Deal redux or redo. We'll see. This comes from Politico. Headline: Progressives look to recharge the Green New Deal for the AI era. I call this the keep the climate realism show going forever scenario. So for what it's worth, let me read from it. A new crop of progressive Democrats poised to join the House next year could pump new energy into the quest for a Green New Deal and even expand its scope 8 years after activists put the aggressive climate change policy in the spotlight. The insurgents, some of whom have unseated more moderate incumbents in closely watched primaries for safe blue seats, will arrive at a time when Democrats focus less on talking about a climate crisis and more about pocketbook issues, and when the party is grappling with how to respond to the artificial intelligence boom. Quote, the Green New Deal, frankly, is a floor now, not a ceiling, for what we need to actually be looking at doing, said Milat Quiros, an attorney who unseated incumbent Colorado Representative Diana DeGette in a primary last month. During a June debate, Villa Chevalier also touted a broad Green New Deal. Quote, we need to make sure that we are fighting for the repairs that public housing needs by fighting for a Green New Deal for public housing, which would not only allow us to repair the New York City Housing Authority so that residents can have a dignified place to live, I would also decarbonize it. I can't be, if you don't understand that, I can't be held responsible. I'm sorry. I'm just reading the quote. And finally, in an April forum, New Jersey Democrat Adam Hamaway, who won a primary to replace retiring Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman, said, quote, "We don't talk about this enough, but we need to pass the Green New Deal." Sterling, I thought the Green New Deal was deader than we're all supposed to be because of net neutrality and also climate change and all the other things that's supposed to kill us. But here it is. It's making a comeback. Yay.
Well, a lot of people thought socialism was dead when the Soviet Union fell and the wall came down. But like Dracula, the state gets pulled out and it's back. It's just in a different guise. It's the Green Democratic Socialist Party, and they are disrupting democratic politics. Even Jared Polis, no friend of climate realists, no lover of oil and gas in Colorado, the governor of Colorado, has said, we got to get rid of these democratic socialists. We can't have them be the standard bearers for our party. And among their policies that they seem universally gathered around is the Green New Deal, which we basically, to some degree ended with the Big Beautiful Bill. Biden did it through the back door with his laughingly titled, just basically lyingly titled Inflation Reduction Act. It did nothing to reduce inflation. It added to inflation. But it was a way to fund the Green New Deal stuff that we couldn't get through the front door with the name Green New Deal. And Trump has stopped that, but it's only stopped as long as the politicians in power reject it. And we have elections coming up. And these guys, look, let's say terrible scenario, but the Democrats win the House and the Senate, and they pass a Green New Deal, whether light or heavy. Fortunately, Trump's in for 2 more years. It'll get vetoed. But he's in for 2 more years. And if the same cabal of democratic socialists control the Congress when the next president comes in, if he's not somebody who's sound like Trump on energy and climate policy, we could be in trouble.
Yeah. Commies do suck. Hey, John, don't you guys pretty much already have the Green New Deal up there in Canada already? Maybe you can report on how that's working out.
Well, exactly. We do. And because in Canada, we're very proud of being independent from the United States. So if you bring in something called Medicare, we bring in something called Medicare and that sort of thing. But of course, the punchline is that they really thought it would reduce inflation, the Biden Act, because they thought alternate energy was cheaper, but they were wrong. And so, the news story started with one of my pet peeves that something could happen. Like our typical retort there is, yeah, unless it doesn't, right? What kind of a news story is it could give new energy to these loonies? But if they do get in and they do implement it, what people will see is that prices are going up, the lights are going out, they can't get the air conditioning on, there's grid failure, and people will, once again, because foolishness is a renewable resource, but in the end, truth catches up because, one of the things about the left, they really do believe the stuff they say, but it doesn't correspond very well with reality. Conservatives, broadly speaking, are the reality party. And the reality is you can't power a modern economy on wind and solar. Everywhere it's tried, it goes badly wrong. And of course, in Canada, we have this great thing. Our prime minister is a master of this gassy rhetoric, the glass speed game. He's always signing memorandums of this or that. He created a major projects office. We had too much red tape, so he created a major projects office to add to the red tape, and it hasn't approved anything. And there's all this, he flies around, goes to meetings, all this highfalutin talk, but we have a productivity crisis, investment is fleeing, and eventually that catches up with all this verbiage. So, the situation is dismal, but don't lose hope because democracy is premised on the notion in the long run, as Jay Budgetchevsky says, people are logical slowly. And if this re-energizes the Democratic Party, it will hurt them, not help them politically.
Boy, that's a very optimistic take. I
No, it's
appreciate
hopeful, not optimistic.
I appreciate your hopeful optimism there. I just I'm very concerned. And I just want to say one thing. You talk about democracy. In the United States, we used to be proud of not being a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. There are boundaries for the realm of democracy to act. And I've read my Constitution, and I don't see the word climate change in there once. A lot of things aren't in the Constitution that the government's doing, and that means they're actually illegitimate. If they aren't charged with the Constitution of doing it, I don't care how democracy votes. I don't care what you can convince people. I mean, hell, in New Jersey, they convinced people that they believed in affordability. The same people who wrecked the system were reelected. You know, that they are the definition of Einstein's madness, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You can fool people in democracy. That's why the balance are put in there, and the balance are being ignored.
Yeah, and of course, the problem is if people lose sight of how the system works and why. I mean, remember going back to the New Deal, at one point, the court ruled that a person growing food on their own farm to eat themselves was affecting interstate commerce and could be regulated. And this was a doctrine that would have astonished, George Washington. But again, I want to respond to the bigger point. Like I always say, optimism is a psychological condition and generally fatuous. I am very, very frightened by what's happening in public policy. But hope is a theological virtue. And I'm a historian by training, actually. I'm an American historian. And when you see how badly things have been going for hundreds of years and how somehow or other we have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, I think we need to be honest about how bad it is. And you're very right about what's happening with the American Constitution. And it's worse here. I promise you, it's a lot worse. But we have to believe that if we put our shoulder to the wheel and we stay positive and we stay realistic, somehow we too will triumph over what looked like overwhelming tidal waves of idiocy with malice lurking behind it. We can do this.
You just made a good point, John, because we have been doing that. The Heartland Institute's been doing that for a couple of decades now, fighting against climate alarmism, right? And at this stage, we're winning somewhat. We've been punching above our weight for a long time. They say we're funded by big oil. We aren't. But they're funded to the tunes of billions of dollars.
Yeah, tell me big oil. Tell me who's doing it.
Yeah, some of it from government.
Give them a call.
And yet, right now, we've done a holding action for 20 years, and now we're winning a bit. And that, you're right. I was wrong to dispute you, John. Optimism is warranted.
Yeah. Well,
one of my first jobs was at the Fraser Institute in Canada, which was created in the 1970s to fight socialism. And it's like, surely you could lose in easier ways, but they didn't lose. And again, it's like World War II. I've often said if World War II had never happened and you wrote up this great magnum opus, sent it to a publisher, they'd send it back. They'd say, this could never happen. You've got to make the odds less dismal. This Hitler guy, you got to tone him down. That's too ridiculous. This Churchill, no one's going to buy that. But these things do happen. And again, I'm not minimizing the problem. There's lots of things that really could get us, but I think we should be happy warriors, because it's wonderful to have hard work worth doing. And I do think we're winning on the climate thing. There's something else even stupider will come along, but I honestly think the tide is turning. And again, if you look at the founding prospectus of the Heartland Institute, people would say, well, that's ridiculous. This is never going to work. And yet here you are.
Yeah, Sterling did mention that the Heartland Institute that we for many years have been punching above our weight. There's actually a way that you can punch above your weight financially, and that is by investing in precious metals. Because, if you're like me, you listen to a ton of conservative shows on streaming, and you hear lots of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals, and most of them did not have a segue as good as that. And there are tons of places where you can invest in precious metals, but we want to tell you why you should go with our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and that's the man who runs the company, Ira Bershatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He doesn't employ high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys that you see from many in big gold. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you are dealing in quality bullion. You're not going to get a bunch of rare coins, they say, that you don't really want. And this is so much better when it's time to liquidate this very valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you're going to have that investment sent directly and discreetly to your home. Also want to mention that Ira advertises with the Heartland Institute on our programs because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats, and he refuses to work with the proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of outfits like the World Economic Forum. That is why we are so proud to have him as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio, or if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/ metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will make the process so easy for you. Just go to climaterealismshow.com/medals, and please be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us in this program while you are helping your financial future. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter. And we are ready to get to Q&A, everybody's favorite segment. Take it away, Linnea.
That's right. I waited and I didn't get cut off. Okay.
How was that segue, Linnea? Am I catching up to you? Is that pretty
That
good?
was good. That was solid. Yeah. Can't
Solid.
complain.
I got a solid 7.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. We have a whole bunch of questions here today. First one, I'm going to go right to John here because it's kind of a funny question. Scott Clay says, John, you're funded by Big Oil too, right?
Not nearly enough. Since we're one of the few groups in Canada who are saying that they're not destroying the planet and shouldn't be hustled off to the chopping block. People say, "Oh, you're getting all this money from Big Oil," and it's like, well, tell me who it is, because I need to get in touch with them and explain that the check hasn't arrived. And it's amazing because you look at the enormous amounts of money available to alarmist groups, a lot of it government money. And we run the Climate Discussion Nexus on a shoestring. People are like, well, have your staff do this or that. It's like, I am the staff. But if Big Oil would like to fund us, we'd be happy to take it, because we don't think what they make is poisoning the environment, wrecking life on the planet, and is part of some dreadful scheme to burn up the only place they could ever live. So, yeah, not enough, not nearly enough. Send money.
Absolutely. All right. We have a nice comment from Darren and Loki, who says, it's so good to see John here. Big fan of his CDN newsletter readings. So you've got fans in the chat, John.
Well, thank you very much. Yay.
All righty. Let's get... and this is another not question, but I wanted to put it up anyway because I thought it was really funny. And Let There Be Light says, Trump supports making daylight savings time permanent. However, AOC points out that the extra hour of sunlight all year round will inevitably accelerate global warming. That's good.
We have the best audience, man. I love it.
We do. We have a great audience. All right. This is an interesting question. So Chris says, do people have any sort of right to darkness at nighttime? Sterling, what do you think about this one?
Well, a legal right, I think the answer is largely no, unless at a local level you can show, let's say someone put up concert lights in their backyard and shined them into their neighbors' windows. That would probably constitute a nuisance that they could fight against. But I've never heard of a legal right to darkness.
I'll tell you who does have a legal right to darkness. Sea turtles. So where I live, there's certain times of the year where you can't have outdoor lights turned on if you live close enough to the beach, because it will cause the sea turtles when they hatch to go the wrong direction or something. So at least sea turtles have a right to darkness. I don't know if people do.
Yeah, sea turtles are more important than people. We all know that. I've read the ESA, Endangered Species Act.
Anthony, you're muted, I think.
Anthony.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a mutant. Anyway, Sterling, you mentioned that you could sue for a nuisance lighting situation, like somebody putting up stadium lights next door, because they've got a Field of Dreams baseball field in their backyard or something. Why is that any different than a light from space coming down that you didn't ask for? It's a nuisance, right?
Well, supposedly they can direct that light.
But as a matter of fact, I'm coming to you from a lake, and we get here after dark, and we can see lights from cities that are 60 to 100 kilometers away. And it could be fixed, right? One of the things about cities, streetlights have that bulb that comes down. They could just sheath it so it directs the light down to the pavement. There's a lot of stuff that could be done here and should. And I was thinking back to this famous case Edward Cook talks about, where somebody had a pig farm start up next to them, and they sued on the ground that they had a right to be stench free, and they won. Now, that was pretty extreme compared to the lights of Kingston that we're seeing. But, we should have a right to darkness at night. it is an intrusion on our enjoyment of our property. And again, light pollution is something we could and should try and fix. I remember taking somebody up to my parents' cottage many years ago and showing them the Milky Way, and they'd never seen it because they'd grown up in cities. They didn't know what it was. And up there at the time, there was no light from the cities, but now there is. It's encroaching everywhere, and it's ruining things.
Yeah, light pollution is a big problem. Astronomers have pointed it out for years. And so now we've got astronomers worried about all these Starlink tracks going through the sky and giant space mirrors. They're just not having a good time of it.
I remember the first time I lived in Montana, we had a person that stayed on the ranch that I was on who had one of those big lens cameras that moved very slowly across the night sky tracking. And I stood out there and I thought, wow, the stars are amazing. You just never see anything. You know, Montana's called the big sky country. And the guy was saying, he said, yeah. And I said, I just wish the clouds would dissipate so you could see it even better. And he said, what clouds? And I said, all that hazy stuff up there. And he goes, that's not clouds, son. That's the Milky Way. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, from Nothing As It Seems says, we loathe kilometers, John. This is America. You're not allowed to use those references.
Yeah, I stand corrected. Because I'll
take
say
your kilometers and go back where you came from.
I pointed out about the metric versus the imperial system that a pound is a useful measurement, right? It's a rock that's light enough to throw but heavy enough to hurt. A kilogram, it's nothing. A kilogram is nothing. A mile is a comfortable stroll. A kilometer is nothing. But it's the difference between Canada and America. When Pierre Trudeau told us to go metric, we did. When Jimmy Carter told you to go metric, you voted him out.
Right.
God bless America.
All right. This is a question about Canada. So from Jay Wester, didn't Canadian forest fires go significantly down in 2020 when everyone was locked inside? Must be a coincidence.
Well, they vary, right? I mean, there's a lot of variability in nature. We had a really bad year last year, and it's like, oh, it's the apocalypse. But it's not the sort of thing that follows a smooth linear trend. Though if you look back, 100 or 200 years, it's clear there were a lot more forest fires here, as in the U.S., than there are now. But it's one of those things that you just don't look for trends over a period of 1 or 2 years because it's not that kind of scale.
I just looked up a PNAS article. COVID-19 lockdowns drive decline in active fires in southeastern United States by 21%.
So arsonists obey COVID laws, evidently.
Huh.
Unlike criminals and gun laws, arsonists stay indoors when you have to wear masks.
All right. Let's see. Oh, this is a funny comment from Claire who says, I thought the government was working on dimming the sun to cool the earth. Now they want to make it brighter. Yeah.
Good point.
Absolutely. Okay. That's not really a question. Oh, this is a question from longtime viewer Luke Starkenberg. Sterling, I'm pitching this one to you. Question. Is the Heartland Institute pro-solar and batteries? I haven't heard of rolling blackouts or brownouts this hot summer. I have, Luke. At East Coast, I have friends who were without power for a while this year.
Yeah, and we've had some this summer in Texas. But I'll answer your question. The Heartland Institute is, in fact, neither pro nor anti-solar and batteries. We are pro-energy freedom. So long as the technology is not subsidized, we want them to compete in the marketplace. If solar and batteries went out without subsidies, without government support, then they do. But they don't win out without subsidies and government support. So we generally oppose them. Oil, gas, coal, they don't need government support. And they compete well because they're reliable and relatively affordable. The only way you can make solar and
Looks like Sterling froze.
Rolling internet blackouts on Sterling.
Yeah.
And I
want to say I'm pro-solar. I'm absolutely pro-solar because I want the sun to keep shining for millions of years.
Yeah, and I've seen exceptionally cool applications of, private solar and battery, like Tesla battery packs or whatever in your house and stuff. Grid scale, it becomes quite a bit more complicated. And I think that in general, the Heartland Institute is just against the kind of false narrative that's been promoted that solar and batteries is significantly cheaper than traditional energy sources, when it just isn't. The data does not bear out to that unless you use some very fancy calculations for levelized costs that ignore like everything that matters.
But even the home ones, look, there are isolated places where solar or wind might make sense because you're not going to hook up to the grid. But in my neighborhood, I'm sorry, if you got solar panels on your roof and you've got a battery pack in your house, I helped pay for that. They are subsidized.
Yeah.
And that is what we're against.
And also the idea that solar is environmentally cleaner than other forms of always-on energy. The environmental impacts, negative environmental impacts of producing solar panels and disposing of solar panels is never really talked about, certainly not by the environmental left.
And the batteries. Huge impact.
To be fair, I'm actually sitting here surrounded by the most efficient solar panels that have ever been created. They're called leaves, and they're actually storing energy in batteries called trees. And later, when it gets cold, we will release that energy in our fireplace. So
that's amazing. That's renewable right there. All right. Kite Man Music has a challenging question. I'm going to pitch it to you, Anthony. He says, is there any discussion on the current world heat wave, or is it being ignored by the panel?
Well, we have talked about heat waves probably, I'd say maybe a dozen times here on this show and its existence. So no, we're not ignoring it. But I will say that we are ignoring the fact that, these things get hyped to death. We just don't want to talk about that anymore because it's just so dumb. I mean, every heat wave out there, it seems the media jumps on it and say, it's unprecedented, it's record breaking, it's caused by climate change, et cetera, et cetera. It turns into an alarm factory. And, we're anti-alarmism here. We don't really want to promote the idea that heat waves are getting worse or anything, because they're not. If you go look at the data, especially in the 1930s in the United States with the Dust Bowl, but also historical events that have happened throughout history, record heat waves have been part of humanity for as long as humanity has been around. It's nothing new. It's not tied to climate change. And the biggest mistake everybody makes in the media is they basically ignore the fact that weather is not climate. Weather is an event that happens 3, 4, 5 days for a heat wave, right? But climate is something that is an abstract. It is a average of weather. Climate, is an average of temperature and rainfall, or both, over 30 years. Heat waves are not climate.
And we do talk about, we're not talking about it on this particular show, but they could go to climaterealism.com and see we probably have, over the past 2 to 3 weeks, a half a dozen posts on the heat wave in Europe, in England, in New England, refuting stories that claim it's unprecedented. We've never seen temperatures like this, that it couldn't have happened without climate change. So we do address it.
All right. This is a great question. This is for you, John, from G Carusa or G Car USA, I'm not sure, who says, regarding the Canadian forest fires, I read that part of the problem this year is zombie fires. That is, fires from last year that smoldered through the winter. Is this a real phenomena? I know it's real in peat bogs. I don't know about Canadian forest.
Well, yes. I mean, it is and always has been, because bearing in mind, Canada is a very large country. We're only very slightly larger than the US if you don't count the water, but we also have half the world's freshwater lakes. But yeah, we have all kinds of terrain. And of course, fires don't just go out. Remember one time years ago, we had this big bonfire to burn a bunch of junk at my mom's farm. And it was burning underground for 3 days. And we were looking at it going, perhaps we should have been a little more careful in our precautions. But you get out into the Canadian wilderness. I mean, 90% of us live close to the American border. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that nobody has much of an eye on. And lots of what's underground is flammable. As a matter of fact, I'm currently at our little island, and I don't dare have outdoor fires here because it would go underground from one end to the other. Fires are complicated phenomena, and they affect landscapes and the pattern of forest regeneration and the tendency of things to come in waves. So there's a lot of fires, and then there's not very many fires. But yeah, if somebody told you have to stop there being fires in Canada, you would change your name and move to New Zealand rather than assume that responsibility. Because again, I said 300 billion trees, continental scale country, and much of it very empty, and everything from peat moss to tundra. Canada is marvelous. If you've never been here, you should come and see it. We were just up in the Arctic, and the ice is still there, and it was so beautiful, though also mind-numbingly cold. But there will be fires, yeah.
Alrighty, thank you very much. Let's see. This is an interesting question. I'm going to pitch this to you, Anthony. Another science question from Jay Wester, who says, can you confirm how it is that some come to the conclusion that carbon dioxide was much lower in the past and others come to the opposite conclusion?
Well, some people are nuts. That's all I can say. I don't know. I can't read their minds. But, carbon dioxide has fluctuated all throughout history. It's gone up, it's gone down. It nearly disappeared when we had the Ice Age, down to the point of, I think, somewhere around
180 parts per million.
Yeah, right. And I think at around 250 or whatever, and 180 parts per million, I think, is where photosynthesis stops.
Right. 150 for C3.
Yeah, and it got down to like 240. And
it got down to
it's
180.
gone up, it's gone down. There's no real, pattern to it.
And it depends on the time period that you're talking about. Ancient geologic history. Look, all we have is proxy data for stuff, and proxy data is a broad range. But we know that it's gone way down in the past, and it's gone way up in the past. For most of the Earth's history, it was much higher. For some periods, 5,000 parts per million than it is today.
That's true.
So during the depths of the last ice age, the last interglacial, actually, it got down to 180 parts per million. And if it continued to go down, if it hit 150, plants stop photosynthesizing and we all die.
Yeah, I just noticed that Jay Wester 7009 has Clippy as his icon. Let me just say, Clippy was annoying then, and he's annoying now.
Oh,
No, I miss Clippy. We all miss Clippy.
we all miss Clippy. That's right.
I didn't even know who Clippy was, so I can't miss or not miss him.
Well, you're fortunate.
I can't believe you missed that.
One of the best jokes to come out of ClimateGate was a Clippy meme where it said, I see that you're writing a scientific article. Would you like me to submit a letter to have the journal editor fired so you can get it published?
This is a comment from Michael, who says, great to see John on the panel today. CDN and Heartland are my go-to sources for all things climate related. Bravo.
All right.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let's see.
Yeah, you got a ton of fans in the chat today, John. We'll have to have you back a lot.
I would be delighted to return.
Okay. Oh, so this is having to do with the lawsuit that we're trying, that Kagan should be recusing herself from. Chris says, do the complainants argue that the public have been duped into using fossil fuels? And just for a little bit of outside context, extra context here, what this argument is that, Colorado is looking at trying to sue oil companies for climate change, right? But the problem is that the climate change, or the emissions that they're blaming on climate, or they're blaming climate change on, come from people using a product. Yeah. People knowingly using a product. So the question from Chris, do the complainants argue that the public have been duped or, tricked into using fossil fuels? I don't think they do.
That's not what they're arguing at all. In fact, they ignore the fact that it's the users that put out the CO2, not the companies themselves. What they argue is that the companies knew emissions caused climate change, and they sold a dangerous product despite that. And they hid the fact that it was a dangerous product. So that's the claims.
That's like suing McDonald's for people being fat. I don't understand the logic on this. I'm not a lawyer. I never will be a lawyer. Maybe that's to my benefit, but I don't get it.
Yeah, it's factually false, though. It's just factually false. There's no evidence. There's no strong evidence that human CO2 emissions are causing a climate crisis, that it's done any damage to Colorado whatsoever, or, and this is as important as anything, that they can tie any supposed damage to any particular oil company, which is what you have to be able to do in a lawsuit.
Yeah, that's where the attribution science scam comes in. Jesse Kurtz over on Facebook asks, has the Industrial Revolution driven carbon dioxide to dangerous levels? What is a dangerous level?
Over 5,000 parts per million, according to the U.S. Navy, where they monitor it in submarines. And you start getting dizzy and impaired at levels over 5,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that could be said about that. But one point is that for some reason, alarmists maintain that half of human CO2 is absorbed in the natural carbon cycle and half is not, whereas all the natural stuff is. And I've never understood how nature's meant to tell the two apart. But the other thing, Patrick Moore, this Greenpeace co-founder who left the organization because it went insane, has argued that it's been over tens and even hundreds of millions of years, hard shell sea creatures have been sequestering carbon dioxide and calcium carbonate that then falls to the sea bottom, becomes limestone and marble. And this carbon famine that was referred to earlier, if it gets down to 150, everything but the C4 photosynthesis plants die. So I don't think the Industrial Revolution's really affected it, but if it did, good. Because we've got to keep it way above 150. If it was at 600 or 800, that would at least give us a margin of safety.
Yep. Alrighty, let me see. Trying to find another question that's kind of tangential to what we're already talking about. This is a good question for you, Chris, or John, from Chris, who says, I can't figure out if Carney is backing away from net zero or not. Does John know one way or the other?
Mark Blarney drives me crazy. It prompts me to quote G.K. Chesterton that men always mean something even when their words don't. Because Carney lives in this world of such abstractions that I'm not often sure that he knows what he thinks. But no, in his heart, he really is committed to the green energy transition. He really believes that's the way the world is going. He really believes that it will save us money over time. But Mark Carney is one of these guys who spent a career convincing people to hire him for jobs he wasn't really very good at. And he's done it again as Prime Minister of Canada. He's not good at doing things. He's always on a jet airplane spewing carbon and going and meeting people in Abu Dhabi or wherever he's gotten off to. But in terms of sitting at his desk, solving problems, passing meaningful legislation, getting projects built, he's very bad at the actual mechanics of governing. But he's not backing away. He's trying to do things that aren't possible. But in his heart, he's still very much the green international man of mystery.
But didn't he recently say that Trudeau went too far and we've got to back off some of these targets and things because it's bad for them economically in the short term, that they've got to tone down some of their green ambitions? He may not believe in his heart of hearts, but like you say, he gets hired for jobs he's not qualified for. I think he wants to stay Prime Minister of Canada.
I think when people get tired of him, he will be out of this country faster than Michael Ignatieff. But yeah, I mean, sort of criticize, well, Trudeau didn't do it right, and we're not going to meet those targets. We're going to meet these targets, and we're going to have consumer carbon price. We're going to have an industrial carbon price, and we're going to have pipelines subject to a regulatory process no one can understand that will never actually work. And again, it's a combination of zealotry and incompetence, and there's no reason why those two don't go together. So to the extent that anyone can figure out what Mark Carney thinks, including Mark Carney, I believe that he's still deeply committed to this green energy transition, and he's also never going to become an effective prime minister.
Look, you can't trust carnies. Everybody knows that. They're always trying to scam you.
Yeah.
Follow-up. Bit of a follow-up question there is, does John think that Alberta can win out over the Ontario net zero madness?
Again, hope versus optimism here. Alberta, of course, I mean, Danielle Smith, and I have actually known Danielle for years, and she was a very good radio host, but as a politician, she kind of lacks spine. And for years, I've been telling her, we have to challenge the science around climate change, or we can't challenge the policy. And she always says, oh, John, we lost that debate years ago. And I always say, no, we never even had it because you didn't dare to. But it's not really Alberta or Ontario. It's reality versus left-wing dreams. And the reality can win out. And Canada can't keep going on the course it's going. Again, you look at, per capita income here in the United States, and how they've been diverging dramatically over more than a decade. And you can't make that stop with things that don't work. So what is going to end up winning out, and I hope it does it without a whole lot of political upheaval, is the reality of the energy basis of our economy. But put not your faith in politicians. It's really, really rare. That the last American president I really liked and trusted was Calvin Coolidge, and he's been gone for a while.
Really quick answer to a short question here that I can just answer really quick. Where'd it go? Oh no, Kite Man, your question. Oh yeah. How did plants and animals survive the Ice Age? There have been multiple ice ages, and the answer is that most of them didn't. The one around the Ordovician destroyed, I think, like 85% of all life on Earth or something like that. It's the answer is very narrowly on the grand scheme of things. So yeah, cold is not our friend, that's for sure. Let's go Tom White, and this is for you, Anthony. Electroverse says half of Hunga Tonga's water vapor is still in the atmosphere. What do you think?
Let's see. Peaked around 2022. 4 years. Yeah, that might be a bit high. I would say closer to maybe 10 to 20%. Water vapor comes out pretty quick. And we've seen this happening on the UAH satellite temperature, which looks at the lower troposphere. And we've seen a big drop in that. So yeah, I don't think a whole lot of it's still there. I think it's pretty much all precipitated out back to pretty close to its original equilibrium.
All right, thank you very much.
Got to remember, Electroverse, great site in lots of ways, but they're still click driven in lots of ways too.
Yeah. Great, good comment from Rico Man here, who says, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if it knew how much carbon dioxide it was releasing? Very important, deep philosophical questions on the Climate Realism show.
That's a whole scientific paper all by itself.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly, some climate alarmists could get government funding to get it published.
I'll bet you there's a story about woodchucks and carbon dioxide. That anything goes with these folks. Let me find one.
All right. I've got one more question here having to do with the solar thing again, solar geoengineering. So Randy says, just like solar generating systems that turn birds into crispy roasted chickens, how will these mirrors affect animal behavior? The mirror idea seems better suited for a sci-fi movie. I mean, there's all sorts of, patterns of sleep and wake cycles for animals that are dependent on the amount of light, all sorts of plants and stuff that matters for. So
based on my limited outdoor lighting, I can say it will concentrate insects.
Yeah.
It will probably disrupt the sleep patterns of a lot of birds.
Bats might like it because of the insect thing, but
except that they then have to fly into light, and bats don't typically love light. And owls would be disadvantaged versus other raptors. So,
I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't screw around with this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
It's the whole
maybe.
planet.
I don't know.
All
right.
Crazy idea here, but geez.
That is all the questions that I have in my list here. So
let me follow up on the woodchuck and carbon dioxide question.
Okay, please do.
I did not find anything that said woodchucks are creating more carbon dioxide or whatever. But what I did find is that carbon dioxide is used as a weapon against them. Yes, if you throw dry ice, frozen carbon dioxide down woodchuck holes, you will suffocate them. There you go.
That's terrific. All right.
Oh, should have thought about that for my chipmunk problem here. Probably works.
Yeah, come on. Gassing them. All right. Well, and actually, John, we have a lot of people in the chat here who are familiar with Climate Discussion Nexus. I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity, though, to kind of take the stage and talk about your work and tell people how they can follow you and all of that good stuff.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for having me on the program. It's been great fun. They can go to climatediscussionnexus.com, and we're Climate DN on various social media, including YouTube. We started out in 2019. It's kind of Canadian focused and producing a newsletter. But we discovered after a period of obscurity, we'd done a video on the 97% consensus myth, and it suddenly went viral. I still don't know why or how. It's had over 1 million views. And we got a great response around the world, including the United States. And a whole lot of it was the videos. So we now concentrate on the videos, though we still make the newsletter, and I hope people will sign up for it. And, you know, we never talk down to our audience. We keep it clean. We insist that the big problem here is sincere error rather than grift or fraud of any sort. And we stay cheerful, and we think hope will prevail, and we'd love to have you subscribe. And of course, like everybody says, we'd love you to have you support our work, because the videos don't make themselves.
I'll give it back to Jim here. I don't know how to do it on my screen, so someone's got to do it.
Right. Yes. Slice. It's scrolling across the bottom of your screen right now. If you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, or X, visit climatediscussionnexus.com. John Robson founded and heads that organization, and hopefully he can add one day multiple time guest on the Climate Realism Show, because we've had such a great time with you today. So thank you very much, John, for being with us. Thank you, Anthony Watts. Thank you, Sterling Burnett, and thank you, Linnea Lueken, for being with us today. And thank you to our very, very lovely audience, who are always making the show so much fun because they're participating in the chat. So I would recommend that you bring friends that love this topic and just love having a good time and learning stuff to come join us every single Friday, except the Fridays we don't do it, once in a while, at 1 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube and Rumble and X. I want to thank our streaming partners again that help get this show out there to more people: junkscience.com, CFAC, the CO2 Coalition, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Always visit climaterealism.com, where you can see the writings of our three regular panelists, Anthony, Linnea, and Sterling. Go to climateataglance.com to get the facts you need to have a good debate and win a debate about climate. Go to energyattaglance.com. A lot of stuff you can learn there. And again, go to heartland.org/TCRS, where you can help support this show. That'll do it for this week. We will see you next Friday. Bye-bye.